Hello and welcome again. As you probably know by now, my name's Jessica Rutiki and I'm the Operations Manager at the Global Distributors Collective. It's my pleasure to welcome you here all today for the second training session in our series of 3 on the benchmarking KPIs for last mile distributors. So today's session will focus on 9 KPIs that are related specifically to sales and marketing. We have Lucy and she from Hystra who are going to be delivering this training for you today. And as a reminder, the training is delivered with support from GetInvest, who are a European technical advisory facility that mobilizes investment in renewable energy. And they have a program called the FRS. As a donor-funded program, GetInvest services are entirely free of charge, and there is a year-round application, although I do believe it's just closed. I'm going to drop the link in the chat for you guys anyway, so you can have a little look and find out more if you're interested in that program. So this training today will last, the training itself for about 60 minutes, but we've got a good 20 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So as we did last time, I would ask you to I think I just got muted. Sorry about that. If you have any questions as we go along on the KPIs, please drop them in the chat. And what we'll do is we'll answer them at the end of the session. So please do keep yourself muted until we get to the question and answers session at the end. How are you getting on with the slides?
Yeah, I can't seem to project anything now for some reason.
Okay.
It just doesn't show up. I mean, I've tried the different options.
Not sure. Maybe I'll try presenting them.
Give me a second. I'll shoot them across to you.
Great. And then what we wanted to do is just remind everyone of how to read the KPIs. So the KPIs themselves are grouped into 3 sections. So there's one best practice, we think, based on the companies we've studied, is where you want to get to if you want to be profitable and financially sustaining organization. And just a reminder that this is our first attempt at a benchmark, and as we get more responses in, we'll be able to refine the benchmarking. So we are also really keen for your kind of input and any kind of like ideas for improvement that you might have. Oh, and I think we've got the slides on screen. Perfect, thanks, She.
I think it's Lucy who got it to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had to restart my Zoom, but it's all working now, so great.
Thanks, Lucy. So I think in that case, I'll hand over to you, Lucy, to take us through the first KPIs.
All right. Nice to see you, everyone. So this is the second session, as Jessica said, of the presentation of this benchmark tool focused on sales and marketing. We'll be taking you through the intro to the benchmark. Jess, do you want to do that? Do you want me to go ahead? Beyond what you just said?
Yeah, you can carry on, Lucy. I think I've explained most of it, but yeah, please go ahead.
All right. So yeah, these are the 9 KPIs we'll look at today. We'll get back to them shortly. Just a quick reminder of what the indicators mean. When we talk about best practice, it means the best we've seen across last mile distribution organizations that we have worked with. And there are more than 70 that were part of this benchmark exercise. Good means that's sufficient to be sustainable, and can be improved means that if you have that KPI at that level, it's really a risk zone for you. So probably good to focus on as soon as possible. So we will start with the first question to get into the marketing spend. So what do you think mass media marketing can help with? And you should see a poll pop up on your screen. So do you think it's useful to increase trust among risk-averse customers, to convince low-income clients of the benefits of your product, to make potential customers understand where and when they can buy the product, or none of the above? This is a single choice one. So pick the one that you think is most relevant. I'll count to 0, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's have a look at the results. So most of you think it's a good way to convince low-income clients of the benefits of your products, or to make customers know where they can buy. Actually, that second answer is the correct one. The challenge when you talk to low-income customers about the kind of products you have, which represent a significant investment for them, is that just having it on the radio, or for those who have a TV, which is going to be a minority on TV, or seeing it on a board, is not going to prove to them that your product is going to last the time you say it's going to last, or that it's going to save them the charcoal or the kerosene that you say it's going to save them. So typically, they're not a good tool, actually, in terms of convincing clients. But if people already know your product, have already seen it work at some of their neighbors, have some family members in urban areas who use it, then indeed it can be useful just to know where they can also purchase this product. But that's the only reason why you would want to use mass media marketing for the types of products you are selling, which require trust. And trust is not built by media, it's built by people. So concretely, for that indicator, what we see, and maybe just a quick definition first, what is called above the line marketing is mass media marketing. So I might use the terms interchangeably. It's what is done with billboard, radio, potentially TV. Below the line, so what's below that line, very visually, marketing is typically in-person marketing, proximity marketing. So it includes what the work your sales agents might be doing directly. It includes potentially demonstration, group demonstration, or other marketing activities that you might do in persons in markets. And we've also put in that category social media marketing, because it is very personalized and very direct, and basically often done via people you trust or you've accepted as friends on Facebook, or you can see directly how other people interact with it. So it's closer to that proximity marketing than to mass media. So what are the benchmark value that you can see at the bottom right? Basically, the amount you spend on above the line marketing, so on this mass media marketing, should be below 5%, ideally even in the best practice case, below 2% of your revenues. This is computed as your marketing, your above the line marketing budget over your total revenues for the year. And so as you can see, the best practice is to have it very low, because again, that's not what is going to convince your clients. The only reason you want to use it is if you've already done demonstrations, you already have some products in a village or in an area, and the only thing you need, the only thing your clients or potential clients need to know is where to buy the product. For other things, you want to spend money on below the line marketing, so on demonstration, group meetings, maybe working with the schools, making sure your sales agents have enough budget to go to the schools around where they are positioned, but not on above the line marketing. So a few best practices. So the first one we've mentioned is limiting the above the line marketing to local radio adverts that will speak about where to get your products. Make sure to invest rather in below the line marketing. If you can, and if your prospective clients are using them, also leverage social media. And finally, make sure to tailor your messages to what you know are the reason why people have not purchased yet, or to the reasons why you know your existing clients have purchased, which is what we saw in the previous session, that understanding of your clients and of your non-clients is really important to tailor your marketing messages. Are there any questions on this one? Jessica, maybe you mentioned that earlier, but don't hesitate to type them in the chat. I can't see the chat, but Jessica will bring the questions up if they relate to the indicator, and otherwise we'll have a Q&A at the end.
No questions so far, Lucy.
Great. So we can move then to the next indicator, which is going to be around market penetration. So market penetration means the percentage of people in an area that have basically purchased your product. So how do you think you can increase that market penetration cost efficiently? Is it by incentivizing your agents to travel further and cover a broader area? Is it by ensuring the sales agents return to a location a few weeks after selling to the first customers? Is it by training and incentivizing existing customers to become sales agents, or incentivizing existing customers to become lead generators and aggregate groups of potential customers who would then be served by your sales agents? So there are two right answers in this one. So again, giving you a bit of time to think through it. And I'll count to 0, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's look at the answers. So we have about the same amount of people who think that you should incentivize your agents to travel further and to return to a location. And we have more people who think you should incentivize customers to become lead generators rather than sales agents. So in the first one, if here we're talking about how to increase your market penetration. So in a given area, how do you make sure you have more customers? And having a higher penetration locally means having a higher density. It means basically also being able to serve better typically that area, because sending a technician, sending an agent will enable to serve more people. So what will incentivize that behavior is the second of the first two, ensuring sales agents return to a location a few weeks after selling to the first customers. Why is that important? Because basically this is the moment when your first customers will already have experienced the product, are going to be starting to talk about it, and you're able to bring, or your sales agent is able to bring some new prospects to see how the product is performing at their first customers. And again, because of that trust building issue, that's really going to be one way to trigger sales that is going to be very effective. So rather than incentivizing your agents to go even further, the first thing you want to do is to make sure they go back to where they were a few weeks before and have made a sale, to capture all these other potential kind of latent demand there is of people who have seen that product and now are thinking, actually, it's working well and I could use one as well. On the second bit, that's a confusion we see quite often, trying to have local people as sales agents. The challenge with that is that, yes, they have the trust of their community. That's the reason why typically companies do that. But they can only cover so much, right? Because they're not necessarily going to be very mobile. And once they've saturated their area, well, you've invested all this time in training them and they have nothing else to do. So rather than leveraging local people as sales agents, you want to have them as your local point of contact, which is not the same thing as a sales agent whom you train and spend money and time on. These contacts are going to be useful for your sales agents, the ones you actually train and spend money on, to be able to help them figure out who in the village is interested or in the community is interested in your product, which ones might have had some issues and might need some support or might need some reassurance that the company is still present, which ones are paying well, or which ones actually need the sales agents to go in person to remind them that they haven't paid in more than 3 weeks. So it's really more of an aggregator and supporter role than a sales agent's role. And the difference is who pays for explaining to them what they should do. And it shouldn't be you. It should be the sales agent potentially recruiting some of their first clients, who by definition will know the product well because they've purchased it, as the ones who will play this role. And then potentially they can earn a small commission on either the money they help you get back or on the new clients they help motivate to purchase your product. So it's important to incentivize them as lead generators, as referrals. And additionally, you can use them in conjunction with the incentive to your agents to go back to these locations to make sure that they liaise with that referral, that existing client, and that whenever they go back to that location a few weeks later, they already have a group of 10, 20 prospects who are basically ready to buy right there, right now. And that's something I've witnessed firsthand in Ghana that Toyola does extremely well. When their sales agents travel, Toyola is a company selling improved cook stoves for, well, 15 years now, or even more than that. And whenever their agents travel to a rural area, they call back some of their previous clients and make sure that when they arrive, they already have, 20, 30 people literally at the village square waiting for the stoves to be delivered and ready to pay the first installment for the stove. Obviously, that's super effective in terms of sales, and also not as costly because you travel for 30 clients in one go, so it amortizes the cost of travel as well. So how to calculate and maximize it, taking a bit of a step back. The question is like, how many eligible customers do you have in a given area of operation? So a village or a community, how many people, households are there, for example? And then how many of these have you managed to serve after a full year or full 2 years? In the little case that's here, that's like you have 4 customers out of 5, that would be an 80% market penetration. This is extremely high and it's very improbable to get there. But the kind of ratio you can get to, which are on the right, depends a bit on the price of your product, because not everyone will necessarily be able to afford them. But for products whose price, like including Paygo products, whose price is above $100, having 20% of a village equipped with your product after 2 years is pretty good. If your product is less expensive, this can go up to 40%. In the case of the Toyola village I mentioned, some of these villages actually achieved even 60 or 70% penetration because the stove was paying for itself with the savings of the charcoal, so nearly everyone could afford it. So we've discussed most of the best practices on the previous slide, leveraging existing customers as lead generators, making sure to group sales in one location, supporting your agents to increase penetration. So teaching them these tricks, explaining to them, suggesting to them to go back to previous locations, to make sure they keep in touch with their first clients and that they use them as lead generators, that they use them to open their door and show their neighbors how the product is working at their place. You can now, which wasn't the case 15 years ago, but you can now automate that with the client relationship management software, CRM softwares that can help you identify where you have a cluster of customers, or send reminders to your agents to tell them, hey, it's been a month since you sold 3 stoves in that area, maybe you should go back now. And the last bit is also ensuring that the senior management spends time on the field. This one is more for you to know what's actually going on. And because sometimes your agents will tell you they're doing things that might not be true. Sometimes they'll tell you that we've seen a lot. This area is already saturated. I can't sell anymore. So I need more travel money to go to, further. And actually, if you go yourself to the village, you'll see that yes, they've sold to the ones who are just next to the road, but if you leave your motorbike and walk to 100 meters behind, there are actually people who would be really interesting in your product who nobody has ever talked to. So making sure that maybe once a month, at most once every 2 months, you personally go to these villages and follow one of your sales agents to see what's going on is also very important to then make sure you can implement some of these best practices. If there are no questions, I'll move to the next one. All right, so we're going to talk about sales now. So that might need a bit of math on your end. The question is for companies like yours that sell durable products, solar products, cook stoves, water filters, what do you think best practice sales force achieve in terms of sales for one agent? So how much can one agent sell in dollars? So if you need a calculator or an Excel, feel free to use that in 1 year at the end user price. So for example, if they sell $120 of products per month, you would multiply that by 12. And that would be what, 12 of about $14,000. No, that's too much. $1,400 for the year. So how much do you think they can sell per year? The other little trick here is that it's converted in full-time equivalent. So if your agents only work, let's say, half of the time, that same agent who is selling $120 per month, then you would need to multiply that by 2 to get how much he would sell if he was working full time, sorry, so 2 times what he's actually working. So in that example I was using, if he's selling about $1,400 per year, working half time, that would be $2,800 for the year. So I'll let you do your little calculation and then I'll do the countdown so you can input your answer. So how much can one best practice sales agent sell in a year? More than $10,000 per year, 15,000 or 20,000. I'll count back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Let's look at the answers. So the winning answer is $15,000 per year, but actually the right answer is 20,000. We've seen quite a lot of Salesforce that managed to achieve that $20,000 level. And I'll just show that on the next slide, which represents across, sorry, that's me moving the slides. So just each of the line here represents the sales per full-time equivalent agent of different companies. So we have about 20-something companies on this chart. At the bottom, below the yellow line, you have companies who are working with part-time entrepreneurs, so part-time sales agents. Above that line, you have organizations that were working with full-time sales agents, except for that one exception, sorry, here, that is there at the 29 level. But as you can see, in general, organizations that work with full-time agents achieve better sales per full-time equivalent than those that don't, in spite of that correction of doubling sales of the part-time agents. Why? Because when you have full-time agents, they learn faster. By definition, they spend more time on the job. So they become better faster. Because of that, they earn better money faster. They don't get discouraged and they stay, and then they continue to improve. The churn is typically high on those lower part-time entrepreneur sales force. The other reason that explains the difference is that many of the companies that don't sell just one type of product, but a mix, and that also sell FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, typically work with local entrepreneurs who are part-time and who sell these products just part of the time. And when you sell a mix of product, it's more difficult to be effective because you have to master several sales pitches. And again, you learn less fast. Even if you're a very good sales agent, you won't be as specialized and as good at explaining one product. But as you can see, a good chunk, like basically all the companies here that are, or nearly all the ones that were working with full-time agents on one type of product, did achieve more than $20,000 of sales per year per agent. So it is totally doable, and it shouldn't be seen as something that's unachievable. So a few ways to achieve this kind of results. Sorry. So you have before you have the values that are on the right, we've made the difference between those companies that sell durable goods and those that sell FMCG, which are the ones at the bottom. With whom for whom we've put smaller amounts, but very honestly, the ones that sell FMCG with a part-time sales force, we haven't seen that many manage to be fully sustainable. So yeah, it's a tricky business to be in. If we think in terms of best practices, how to achieve this kind of Salesforce productivity, the first thing is to make sure that sales agents who join you know what they're joining you for, what they're getting into. So having a recruitment process that emphasizes not just the cool part of the job, but also the tricky ones. Maybe making sure to tell them they're going to have to walk X amount of time with a backpack that weighs X amount of kilos to distribute the solar lanterns to the remote corners of a village. Maybe actually make them test that. Give the potential candidates a bag that weighs that amount of kilos and check that they're happy with that. Because that avoids already a lot of churn that happens after you've spent money training them. The second one is to make sure that you review every agent's performance based on this KPI of sales, not on the number of products they've sold, especially if you have different products at different price points, but really on how much money they've generated. The third one is to make sure you understand what your best sales agents do differently and that you share these sales techniques and routines with the others, or encourage your agents to do that directly via WhatsApp. You can do a small video of that agent explaining what they do differently and that they can then share with others on their WhatsApp group. You can have them explain during the Monday morning gathering, these are the kind of things we do. You can do role plays. There are many different ways to do that, but really making sure that these best practices don't get lost. You can help agents set their own sales targets instead of forcing them or, telling them you have to do X, actually getting them to think through how much money they want to earn. And then given your incentive system, okay, if you want to earn that much, how many sales do you need to have done by the end of the week or by the end of the month? That many. Okay, so if you want to have done 10 sales of solar home systems, then how many people do you need to have seen, given how much you can sell to a group? Okay, you need to have seen 50 people in the week. So how are you going to organize your week to make sure you see 50 people? So helping them realize that they're not doing that for you, but that they're doing that to earn what they want to earn is a really effective management tool to help them be more motivated at what they do. And finally, using technology for ongoing training, the GDC has a number of tech providers that are listed on the online service catalog for digital services on their website. So don't hesitate to go have a look to get some ideas of which of these softwares might be adapted for you. Why is that important? So just before moving to the next question, which is about the cost of these sales agents, just a quick one on why it matters again. So it's the same graph on the left that you've already seen. And on the right, each line is the same company, but it's the amount of money that each of their full-time equivalent sales agents or their sales agents in full-time equivalent were making. So if these agents were working full-time, this is how much money they would have made. And you can see that basically, if you look above the yellow line and a couple of bars above that, nearly all of the agents are earning more than $2,000 per year, which somehow we've found is like the kind of limit, maybe a tiny bit lower or higher, where your agents will stay. And I can't explain it because it depends country per country in theory with different different currencies, different GDP per capita, etc. But somehow that $2,000 is the magic number everywhere, where if you're below that, your agents will not stay because they're not paid enough. And if you're above, then they'll probably be happy. Again, with a bit of modification, but not that much. So if you're not at the $20,000 level, it's going to be very tricky for you to pass that $2,000 bar and to keep your agents happy and productive. Any question on the previous one before we move to compensation?
We don't have any questions, but Habiba put a comment in the chat. Habiba, did you want to expand on that comment? So she wrote, I think sometimes selling a variety of products is like entering a shop of TV sellers, and you can sell several types of TVs.
That's true, but everyone wants a TV and know how it works and trust that the TV will last for whatever they're supposed to last. When you're selling something new with a promise that people have not seen before, or a product that people have seen not work from other brands, you need to build trust, and then you're going to hesitate at buying it at a shop if you don't have some sort of guarantee, proof point, visibility on the fact that the product will work.
Well, I think sorry, I have to come in here. I beg to disagree a bit, because unfortunately for us, I mean, if you were telling me this 14 years ago when I started, that just sell one product so that people get to understand it. One product as in what, for example, I remember when I started with Barefoot, we had the Firefly, we had the 2-point light, I forget the name now. And then we had, like all that levels. If you tell me as a seller now to ensure that my agent sells only one type, what of the people in the community who do not just want a fire but wants the 2-point lighting system, right? And this is what I'm trying to talk about.
Okay.
So
Yes.
I think that maybe it's also about being fair, but even now, as is with the graduation of solar solutions being where they are currently, which is it's a known product now. I mean, even in Nigeria, so many communities use solar solutions. Unfortunately, most of the communities, and I think this is the reason why I really wanted to, be part of this, is most of the communities are actually seeing very cheap fake products, right? When I say fake, like products that are not really good, this is the challenge we are mostly having, because when you have a Sun King, a BioLite, B-Light, those high-level ones, and you go in and it's selling, say, for 50 naira. And you go into a community and the people already bought this other one. I don't know how those people manufacture those products and they're that cheap. And they're 10 naira. And you're thinking, how do I then sell? And I think this is where the major, so your agents are no longer selling for you. They are selling these 10 naira products because they also make scale selling those very cheap ones. I think this is the issue. The fact that now selling one solution is not even, for me, it's not it, because it is fighting the already existing products that are not as good, because now solar has so developed that people understand and they want to have a basket. I always say when we go into a community, we have a basket of products and people have the luxury to choose. They have the luxury of choice, right? Even as is, sometimes we sell maybe the Sun Kings and the high level ones even better, simply because people understand that there's value and they are willing to pay the extra because they've already used the fake ones and it's broken up for them. And now they're willing to, okay, let me go that extra mile and buy a bit more. So this is just what I want. I'm responding to.
So thank you for this, because you made me realize I didn't explain it properly. So again, thank you. When I was talking about mono product, I should have said mono category. So selling just solar products, but totally agree with you. It's great to have a range to cater to different needs, including more expensive ones, more complete ones with that set that include the TV, etc. So completely agree with that. And the other point you made about competition is also very important. Like the penetration rates that we shared earlier, as well as these numbers, were initially gathered in markets when there was not a lot of competition. So yeah, that's where the initial data came from. That being said, once you get to the level where the solar market is now, with a lot of commoditized products of lower quality, as you said, I think there's been a bit of a at the very beginning, you needed to establish trust because no one knew the product and no one believed it could really work that long. Then that picked up, and then people didn't need that much awareness anymore. Trust and building was done, and then all the Chinese products, cheap Chinese products came in, not necessarily good quality ones. And started eroding the trust in the market and making people think, in any case, it's going to die after 2 months. And then the challenges that you mentioned came in of how do I explain the price difference and justify that my product is 2 or 3 or 5 times more expensive. And there, again, you need to recreate that kind of trust, potentially with direct agents who really know what they're talking about. Or if in the meantime, there has been some shops that have started to sell really just this kind of products, and they're able to convey like the quality that you're talking about, then that can become a way to sell these products. Does that fit better with what you've seen?
Yes, it does. It's also fine. Thank you so much. I just wanted us to, have that
No, but
understanding. So yeah.
I think it's a very important distinction. It's true that the market evolves. So a direct sales force makes a lot of sense when you need to build trust. Once that's not needed anymore, you can move to retail or to other ways of selling, for sure. All right. So moving to the cost side of things and how to pay for your sales agents. So what is a cost-effective compensation package? If we can put on the next poll out. So is it what matters is that it must be at least at par with other opportunities that sales agents could have, that it can be lower than other opportunities if agents work for a social purpose and are convinced that they're doing good. Should it include a variable part based on longevity at the company, or a variable part based translating the long-term company objectives? So here again, you can choose one of the first two and then one of the two last ones. So giving you a bit of time for that. All right, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We can have a look at the answers. So, well, that is great. I'm really happy to see that. Yes, you're right. The first one is correct. It must be, the compensation must be at least at par with other opportunities a sales agent could have. In the early days, many companies thought it's okay if I don't pay them as much because they're doing good and they'll be happy with that, but it's not true. You don't keep sales agents just on social purpose. And the second one, actually the variable parts, ideally you want it based on the long-term company objectives and not on longevity at the company. The ones you want to retain are the ones who are working well, bringing high revenues, not the ones who have been there for a long time. And if they have been there for a long time and they perform well, then you'll retain them because they'll have a good variable based on their sales, not based on their longevity at the company. So concretely, what this ratio is about is how much you're paying your agents in a year. So we've kind of seen that those data points on the previous graph. The idea is really to try to understand in terms of full-time equivalent, how much your agents earn. So the values we've seen is that around $2,000, as I said, is typically good. Ideally above $2,500 of revenues per agent will really keep them there. And that's what you want to make sure your best sales agents are paid with the variable included. For part-time sales force, it's typically lower, even once you bring it back to a full-time equivalent basis. And that's also one of the things that explain why sales agents will leave. One exception to that can be if you work with local women who don't have the opportunity to move to the city and who don't have other opportunities locally. We have seen some women sales force in rural areas, remain relatively stable with relatively low income, because again, compared to local other opportunities they could have, that's relatively competitive. So how to compute that and how to offer these good levels of competition? The first thing is to assess the other compensation opportunities that the sales agents profiles that you have could have elsewhere, making sure that your financial incentives are aligned with your company long-term objectives in terms of revenues, and also in terms of, for example, client satisfaction or repayment rates, if you are offering credit. Making the compensation simple and transparent. Sales agents should be able at any point in time to know how much money they will earn by the end of the month based on how much they've sold, or by the end of the week if you pay weekly. And ideally, you can also work with some non-financial or in-kind incentives that cost you less money than what people will recognize in terms of value of this incentive. An example of that would be and it's something that is done sometimes by slightly bigger organizations, is to offer some sort of health incentives, insurance, or insurance for the school fees for the children to the agents who perform best over some amount of time. The company as an aggregator can buy that for relatively little money per month, but the value for the people who get it, especially the school fee one, where, if I don't work, if I'm sick, when it's time to pay the school fee, I can still pay the fees for my children, is one that that sales agents can value a lot. So just giving a couple of examples there of the type of support that can be, the type of incentives that can be provided depending on your objective as a company. See, if you want the sales force to perform beyond sales, one way is to tie the part of the Salesforce commission on the Net Promoter Score, which you saw in the previous session. If you want them to perform consistently, you can have some sort of bonus that depends on performance over several months. If you want them to stay for at least a year, you can have a bonus that's paid only at the end of the year. And if you want to make sure they pay well, if you're offering credit and you want to make sure the clients pay well, you can have part of the incentives based on the repayment rates that you have. Ideally, the early on-time repayment rates, which typically determine how well a client will pay over time. If you want to overcome a learning curve where there is a low sales at the beginning, that's especially true for more complicated products, it might make sense to have at least a fixed salary for some early months, a low, like very limited fixed salary, but still a fixed salary because they will take some time to ramp up. So recognizing that is important, and then it can be phased out once the commissions start kicking in. If you have some attendance issue, you can have daily stipend that are paid only if people tag themselves at different locations during the day, showing that they've done some work. And the retention issues, you can have some more long-term type of incentives with different plans, bronze level, silver level, gold level, for example, tied to different types of objectives. So lots of different ways to do incentives that can correspond and fulfill different objectives. I saw that I think there were some activities in the chat. Jessica, anything I should answer now? Wow, there was a lot of activity in the chat.
It's the automatic note takers.
Okay, great.
Here, but as long as everyone who's actually a person online can hear, you maybe just put your thumbs up so we know that actual people can hear. I mean, I'm hearing fine. Yeah, Habiba's saying that's great.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, yeah, no, it's fine.
Okay, so I'll pass it on here to Chi for the next KPIs.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lucy. And I'll try to keep us in time. We have a few more KPIs to go. So hello, everybody, and let's just carry on with the next question. So we're looking at sales agent cost ratio. And the question here is that the best practice for average compensation for a full-time sales agent selling durable goods, so as a proportion of the revenue that they bring, 5 to 10% of the average revenue generated by a full-time agent, 11 to 15% of average revenue generated by a full-time agent, or greater than 15% of the average revenue generated by a full-time agent. So what the best practice can be, there's on their compensation as a part of the revenue that each agent brings in. I'll leave us 5 seconds, and then 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Maybe we can show the answers now. That's great. So a lot of you actually have it right. It's 5 to 10% of the average revenue. So basically, when we talk about compensation as a proportion of the revenue that agents generate, it is important to make sure that the compensation that you give them is, of course, not too low, comparable with other alternatives, as we had talked earlier, or which are available to them if they do alternative jobs apart from selling for your company, to avoid a high churn. But then to make sure that there is financial sustainability of your model, it cannot be too high either, because you have to make sure that even after paying for the salaries of these sales agents, your gross margins that you generate are high enough to cover for other operational and other downstream costs that are generated. So concretely, the way that we are, if we can just move on to the next one, please. So concretely, thanks a lot, Lucy. So the way to calculate this would then be, yeah, thank you, would be to take the average. So this is what we've talked about in the previous KPIs as well. So the average agent compensation that you have per year, dividing that amount by the average revenue that is generated by the agents every year as well. So the compensation that we're talking about here, it should include the fixed salary, it should include any variable commission-based salary, any stipends that you are giving to the sales agents, maybe for transportation or communication, for their phones, and the cost of non-financial compensation, as Lucy mentioned, health insurance, fees of their children for school, etc. So the best practices, the best practice benchmark values that we've seen here, as we had talked about in the question, for durable goods is about 5 to 10%, and then the same best practice for FMCG is a bit higher, because of all the reasons that were explained in the previous KPIs as well, between 15 to 25% that we've observed for companies that are financially stable and that are doing well in their last mile distribution businesses. And the best practices that have been adopted here by companies are the best practices that we already saw for both the compensation and the revenue generation KPIs. And in addition, making sure that the gross margin that's generated by our agents, it covers their salary, but also leaves space for having other expenses that your company will bear downstream. So including the salaries for other staff, including the operational costs that will come to the business, etc. We, again, as we had said earlier, have to make sure that these salaries are attractive enough to make sure that there is a low churn and the agents don't go elsewhere for better salaries, and that they stay with you and sell for you as a business. And that while staying in this bracket of compensation, those agents who are doing well, given the mix of their fixed and variable remuneration, can actually have the opportunity to become more and more richer as they sell better and better over time. So the next KPI that we'll be looking at is about churn, that we've already talked about a lot. So the question here is, to reduce sales agent churn, you should give them adequate time and training to new agents performing poorly. Focus on non-monetary aspects like team culture more than providing competitive compensation. Promote sales agents quickly to make managers out of the best performers. All of the above or none of the above. So let's do the countdown in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so I see that all of you think that it's either of the 3 options or all the options, whereas it might come as a surprise then. The right answer is actually none of the above. So let's take them one by one. So giving adequate time and training to new agents performing poorly. The idea here is that initially losing agents because they're performing poorly shortly after recruitment it might actually be good for the company before you start investing too much in these agents to train them over time. And even though this might mean artificially high churn initially, it's better to give them a short, fair chance initially. But if these agents are performing poorly, it is more interesting for you to actually separate with them and continue training and promoting agents that have the right kind of skills and can be pushed to perform better for the company over time. In terms of the non-monetary aspects, they are very important for the general well-being of agents. So things like team culture, career progression opportunities, awards and recognition, etc. These are great for morale, but what we have observed is that in terms of affecting the churn rate itself, these do not actually work as well as monetary incentives. And I think that's understandable, because agents first think about their salary and and financial compensation as the most important element when making a decision of whether to stay on with a company or to look at alternative job opportunities. The last one about making managers out of best performers, it's actually a bit counterintuitive, because what happens is that you want to make sure that the best performing agents are actually selling better and better and becoming rich because of it. Um, all sales agents with the skill sets that they develop as sales agents are not necessarily great managers, but they're great sales agents, and you should keep leveraging them and making sure that they feel more and more motivated to work for you and sell even better for you. So that's the answer to the question. So none of the above. And of course, churn itself is, as we've said before, the way we can calculate it is taking the agents who are leaving, say, over a quarter your company, and dividing it by the average number of active agents that you have working during that quarter. So when I say active agents, I again want to come back to the point of making sure that we're not taking those people into the calculation who were separated with right a few weeks after recruitment because you thought that they were performing poorly and it was not interesting to invest in them, but calculating the churn rate for those who spent, say, about 3 months at the company, are no longer in training, and still decide to leave. The chart that we see here, the way to read it is that, well, there's an anonymized list of companies in the first column on the left, and the first line on top shows the different types of policies that companies we surveyed for the benchmark had put in place in terms of financial and non-financial compensation for their sales agents. And the last column is the corresponding churn rate for these companies. So what we can see here is that if you want, and just as a reminder, these are actually companies which were selling durable goods. So those companies who were actually able to maintain a churn rate below 10% had a competitive financial compensation, which was partly fixed. That means that because they're selling complex goods, initially at least, when the market is not very used to the product, when they're settling in, when the agents are settling in, when they're under training, they have at least a minimum salary guaranteed as a fixed. And then over time, as the product gets to be better known in the market and they become more used to selling it, better at it, then you can eventually increase the variable part of their salary and make it more interesting for them to sell more, etc. And the third aspect on the chart, we don't see the right slide, Lucy. Sorry, we've had a bit of a challenge with the projection today. So the third one is basically about close management. So saying that actually agents also need good supervision from their managers, which allows them to sell better and feel supported in the company, which also contributes greatly to their progression and to their selling ability. For those who are above 30%, you'll see that most of them have the competitive salary and the close management in place. But it's not necessarily obvious that having these two will make you go lower than 30% of churn, because you'll see that company 8, company 9, and even company 12, for that matter, have a competitive salary and close management, yet they have much higher rates of churn in their companies. And finally, as I was saying earlier, the companies that have different types of non-financial compensation in place don't necessarily guarantee the fact that you will have a lower churn. So it's more first priority of having a good financial compensation package that matters in terms of churn. So as we were saying, best practice here is about under 10%, and good is between 10 and 30%. And the different types of best practices that we've observed from companies is, of course, providing a competitive salary with a partly fixed salary, as I said earlier, especially initially when they're in training, when they're settling in, when the product is not very well known in the market. Providing them effective and close management. So this is actually a KPI we'll look at next. So I'll be talking about that more, but it's basically about giving them a support system and supervision that enables them to do their job as best possible. Non-monetary awards. So everything that we discussed about, it's also very important for them to feel better in the company itself, be it team culture, be it career progression, awards and events, recognition. These are important elements as well that you should put in place. Exit interviews is for agents that are decided to leave you. You should make sure that you talk to these agents and ask them about the reasons of why they are separating themselves with your company, and make sure to take lessons from that and implement them so that in the future you can avoid these reasons as a cause of churn amongst agents. The last best practice here is about the agent NPS. So this is actually kind of like the KPI that we saw in our first session, but here you basically ask your agent, would you recommend other friends, family members, etc., to become an agent for us? And then you calculate the net promoter score based on that. And that gives you a kind of a measure of how they think about the company and how well they feel about their own role there. So moving forward, there's a small chart here which basically talks about how different types of interventions can avoid churn. So it can be through improved recruitment, hiring, training processes, setting out the right level of compensation, and helping agents to sell, etc., depending on where they are in their journey with your company. So just as few examples, initially in the recruitment phase, you want to make sure that the criteria for you recruiting new agents is based on the characteristics that you've observed in your agents that are already performing well. So making sure that these criteria are taken into account during the recruitment process. Then moving on towards the first and the second months where they're being onboarded, having these recruits who have been selected shadow other agents who do very well, learn from their best practices by actually observing what they're doing, and integrate those practices. And as we said, give them a short and fair chance initially, and separate the company with those who are not performing well and should not be invested in the long term. In the 3 to 6 month phase where they've become independent sales agents, you can offer them hands-on management, you can facilitate peer learning, and you can put in place the 5 KPIs that Lucy was talking about earlier as well, which are monitored daily. Not too many, not too little, but KPIs that can track, say, the number of people that they meet, and also the number of sales that they make, etc., to kind of follow their performance over time. In the 7 to 11 months going on.
Thinking just about being conscious of time, maybe just for everyone, the point there is that know that this chart exists if you're looking for ideas, and we can maybe move to the next slide. We can go back to it if people have appetite for it, maybe in the Q&A at the end.
Yeah, I just realized that we've actually
yes.
we are at the hour. Okay. Thanks for that reminder. So the next one, it's about the sales agents per manager, the close management that I was talking about earlier. So the question here is on agent management. The best practices include conducting weekly meetings between the manager and the sales team, ensuring close management with less than 5 agents per manager, standardizing the routine of the sales managers that they should follow so they know how to best support their agents, or letting managers fully manage their schedules so they can adapt to the best to support agents. And here it's a multiple choice, so you can have 2 answers which are correct. And we'll try to be quick on our feet. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's show the answers then. That's great. A lot of you have got the right answers as your response. So yes, a weekly meeting initially, either at the start of the week or at the end of the week, really makes the team dynamics much better, and they can talk about the different things that they plan for the week, and that's always a great practice. The close management is true. What here is not correct is that it should be with less than 5 agents per manager. We'll see the benchmark. It can be more than that. So for durable goods, it's about 8 to 10 managers, which is the best, 8 to 10 agents per manager, which is the best practice, and then a bit higher for FMCG, which is basically calculated depending on how many times a manager can meet with their agents, which allows them to support everybody throughout the week, and that's how we decide it. That's how it's been decided. The third one, yes, a standard routine is great so that it can, as I was saying, they can follow their agents and support them well. And the last one, well, it's better to have a sort of structure, and that's why letting them fully decide what they want might not be the best practice here. So moving on to the KPI itself, what it is basically calculating how many sales agents you have per active manager. So basically, to calculate the average number of agents, you take the number of agents who've been active each month in the year, and then divide that total by 12. And just a small note on that is that you do not take your aggregator clients that we had talked about into account. It's really about your sales agents. So the reason why it's important is because if you have too many managers, it's going to mean too many high fixed costs for you. But if you have too few, it means that you have inadequate support and supervision of your agents. And this on the left hand side, what you see, the table is an example of the kind of routine that you can set in for your managers to have that they follow throughout the week. So every time there is some one-to-one time for an agent, and in the case of durable goods, if a manager, for example, in the table can spend one-to-one time training 2 agents each day, that would mean that he can do about 8 to 10 agents per week, and that's kind of the best practice that we see across the companies that we have surveyed for this benchmark, which is higher in FMCG, where if these managers are meeting with the agents fortnightly as well, that is sufficient from what we have seen. So supervision, the best practices here are supervision based on product type. So the more complex durable goods where agents need more support, the manager can spend more time with them, and you can have more managers depending on the number of agents that you have. The weekly meetings that are always a good idea, ideally in person, to create positive group dynamics, build accountability for sales targets, promote good client service, and make sure that the procedures and the processes, the best practices, are being adopted by the agents. And finally, we've talked about this, which is to standardize the manager's routine to make sure that they have a good follow-up and support system for the agents that they manage. So the next one, it's about the cost of your field force. And field force here basically means that beyond your sales agents, you also have other supporting staff. So sales operations, technicians, managers, call center staff, sometimes if they're directly in touch with the clients, who also are a part of your field force. And the question here about relating to their cost is to limit this cost of field force. Should you let any agent join the sales force on a pure commission basis, so without a fixed salary, increase the number of part-time agents who will require less management support, or opt for a full-time sales force who will sell more and be overall more cost-effective? Maybe we can put up the poll. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Maybe you can have the answers up as well, please. I see that people are quite divided on it. So a lot of you have got it right, but there are still a good few who thinks that we should let any agent join the sales force on a pure commission basis. It's not true, because both from a management and training standpoint, having agents join implies costs for the company. And if you're letting the more agents that you have, the more management that you need, the more costs you will put into training, into integration, onboarding, etc., etc. So just because their salary is decided by the sales that they make does not mean that we should hire all the agents possible, because there are other costs that are associated to them and inefficiencies that can creep into the company's business if we don't have a good structured recruitment process that filters out the best agents who have the potential to perform well over time. The second option, which is the number of part-time agents requiring less management support, that's actually not true, because even being part-time, the agents still need management support. So the fact that they be full-time or part-time does not necessarily have an effect on the benchmark value itself, which means that they need to be supported as well. So we will need just as many managers to support the part-time agents, even though they don't spend all their time selling for the company. The last one is true. So we've said this before. The full-time sales force uh, makes agents who are committed to their job, who learn well, who can integrate the best practices, who are dedicated to it, so they sell more and more over time, and they end up becoming much more cost effective. And that's what we will see also when we go to the next slide, please, which is that your field costs here on the right hand side, which are shown in a graph, are basically talking about two solar home system pay-go companies that were selling similar products in the similar company in the same country. On the left hand side, you have a company which had mostly agents on commission, where even though their compensation as a part of the sales was very low, but given a higher churn, a higher cost of management for these agents who were turning very quickly, ended up giving us a cost of the sales force as a part of total sales, which was actually higher than another company where it was only full-time agents, for whom the salaries as a proportion of the revenues was much higher. But then, given that these were agents who over time became independent and required little management support, and had lower churn, meant lower management costs as a percent of sales, and overall the company actually had lower field costs in total. So basically here, the best practices that we have seen in terms of benchmark values in durable goods is about having a cost of the field force, so basically the compensation of all your field force as a part of as a fraction of your revenues, of under 13%. And in the FMCG, it is about around 23% to 30%. In both these cases, the idea really is that we haven't seen companies which have been able to go much lower than 13 or 23% in the two cases, because there are still some fixed costs that you have to bear. And even the best performers, they kind of surround around these numbers, which are the best practice. So the best practices very quickly here: complex products, you need to have a full-time closely managed sales force with at least a partly fixed stipend or salary. And this we've talked about quite a bit, so I'm not going to repeat myself. And leveraging of local villagers, existing clients. Here, the example that Lucy mentioned earlier on Toyola is the best practice as well, where you can institutionalize the referral system of satisfied customers, make evangelists out of those people who get you new customers, a certain number of new customers, and give them commissions, gifts, etc., for bringing in and aggregating new orders. So we'll move on to our last and final KPI for today, which is about sales agent time efficiency. So the question here is, sales agents' time and productivity is optimized when they do not do any reporting. They are followed weekly on 5 KPIs that are crucial to their success. They're followed on 5 KPIs that are crucial to success daily. They limit their daily transportation time to 2 hours maximum. They travel as long as they need and go back to the same villages regularly. Or the final one, they travel as long as needed and explore new territories. So here you can have multiple answers. You can have one answer between the first three and then another answer between the last three, which are correct. Let's go on to the answers then. So yeah, most of you have gotten it right, and we talked about this. They should be followed for the first part on 5 KPIs daily, which cover both inputs, so inputs like number of people they meet, and output KPIs, kind of like the number of leads that they get, the number of sales that they close, the cash that they collect, etc. So not having too many, not having too few. 5 is an ideal number. Most of you, about half of you, have gotten also the second part of it correct, which is, as Lucy was talking about earlier, having them, especially when they're selling durable goods, go back to the same villages regularly and leverage the latent demand that exists from customers after the word of mouth for your product has been spread, and then gain aggregated sales from customers who already exist in the communities. So the way to calculate this KPI is basically we take the total number of hours that an agent is spending either on lead generation, on sales, on after-sales services, training and team building. So everything that has got to do with sales, but also training and team building activities that can contribute to a higher performance of the sales force. Versus the time that they're spending either on administrative tasks or on traveling, which is sort of seen as dead time, which is not spent around selling or training, etc. So here we should, of course, keep the distinction in mind that full-time agents typically need more travel time because they will saturate their area and then they have to go to another area, as opposed to part-time agents who stay in their community and sell, and hence they limit their travel time. The best practices that we've observed here for durable goods is a ratio of about more than 65% that they spend on selling activities, training, etc., and much higher for part-time sales agents, where it's above 90%, which is the time that can be spent on sales activities. Some best practices, it is about developing agent routines and routes as well, so telling them how they can best be efficient with their time, the kind of route tracking they can do, and do this for them so that when they execute it they can be more and more efficient. The fact about leveraging current customers to become lead generations, again the point on evangelists that we already discussed. Simplifying sales agents reports to 5 daily KPIs is something we mentioned as well. Track them, making sure that they don't have too much administrative jobs to do, which takes up their time, and give them maybe tools to make it simpler for them. Now we have a lot of applications, etc., which can really facilitate the whole admin process and limit the time they spend on that. And finally, give them incentives for faster travel. So for your best agents, you could maybe give a motorcycle loan for pre-booked big volumes of orders. They can have shared delivery vehicles, and any other incentives that go on the same sense. So that's it for the KPIs for today. I'm sorry about the slight delay we had. We had planned a Q&A to take in the questions. are there any big questions, Jessica, that are still in the chat? And thank you very much, by the way, for everybody who's still here. Maybe we can take quickly if there are any questions from the chat.
So we had one question from Russell in the chat around whether there are any concrete examples of how to incentivize agents that do credit sales. So is it a good idea to spread incentives over the whole of the loan period? Now, I know, Lucy, you responded to that in the chat, but maybe you wanted to just clarify your response to everyone now.
Sure. Yeah, what we've seen, I mean, it depends a bit on the duration of the loan, but if it's more than 3 to 6 months, then having a kind of a proportional percentage of the amount paid to the agent typically doesn't work great, because it becomes very small amount monthly, and agents don't necessarily see the value of that. So a slightly different way to work on the incentivization of agents around credit repayment can be either to incentivize them on PAR 7, so portfolio at risk after 7 days, which is basically a way to know which customers are starting to pay late. But that requires having the tools to tell agents when they have one of their customers that has gone beyond 7 days without paying. So obviously it needs all the back end to give that transparency. Otherwise, it's an impossible job for the agent. The other alternative is to incentivize them on payments after 60 days. So either on the first couple of months of repayments of one of their clients, so whether they've paid on time the first month and then the second month, or on that overall period. So yeah, having one or two payments over the kind of beginning of the loan, because it's also from a kind of repayment perspective, these first 2 months are really critical to make sure that the clients that have purchased their system are going to repay well over time. And if they're not, if the product has not been sold to a client who can repay, or they haven't well understood their contractual obligation, it's really important to get back the system quickly as well. And then obviously impact the sales agents' compensation, so they learn and they don't make that mistake again. So these are the two ways we've seen that have been working pretty well.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. Are there any other questions that anyone had on any of these KPIs? And Jalili, yeah, no worries. I can send you the link to the Get Invest application form after this. That's not a problem. Are there any other comments or kind of best practices that you've seen in your businesses that you want to share with the group while we're here?
To be fair, it was a lot of information in a short amount of time.
And I think
I imagine it.
On that, just as a reminder for everybody, 1 week later, so on the 12th of December, like the last time, we have another drop-in session where you can complete the homework that we have in these sessions of trainings. So the Excel, fill out these KPIs that we've talked about today for your companies as well. I'd be glad to go through them if you send them sufficiently in advance. So if you can maybe send them across around 9th December in the link using the second KPI input of the Excel tool that we are sharing in the chat now. I would be happy to go through the responses that we get, and we have a session of an hour on the 12th of December to discuss any questions that you might have based on your filling up of the tool. We'd love to share your experiences the way that we did last time, and have just an open chat about these KPIs before we have the last and final set of KPIs on overheads and backend infrastructure in January, to finish this series of trainings that we are doing right now.
And just to add to what she said, as a reminder, if you complete the 3 training sessions and the Excel tool as your homework, you'll get the completion certificate at the end of the course. So just to reiterate, if you can fill in your homework and submit it, if possible, by the end of Monday, which is the 9th, we'll have time to look at that and provide any additional feedback or comments in the drop-in session, which is optional. But if you've got any questions or wanted to share any best practices with the rest of the team, we highly encourage you to attend those informal drop-in sessions, which we're having next Thursday on the 12th.